As you might be aware, 14 has an abundance of customizations and quality of life related settings which are not enabled by default when starting out. Some of these things only being added with later patches, causing them to be missed or go unnoticed by long-time players as well. Since all of this can be overwhelming for beginners and also time-consuming if you're trying to figure all of this out by yourself, I'll be going over all important settings rather quickly while explaining how they work and what benefits you get out of them. The one-side effect combat will be covered first and we'll move on to more general things later on. My goal here is to make the gameplay itself more accessible and hopefully save you some time with this, as well as explain some interesting game mechanics that not everyone might be aware of. If your goal is to get into raiding, then checking if you have the best settings for yourself might be a good place to start, since I believe that some things mentioned here will improve your play and consistency to some extent. Most things mentioned will apply to controller and keyboard players alike, with a few exceptions here and there. The most important macros that I think everyone should have are included in this video. Timestamps are also provided of course, so feel free to jump to any section you're interested in. First we go into character configuration, UI settings, then HUD. There we enable display target's remaining HP percentages. With this you can instantly tell how much HP your target has left and how well your group is doing on DPS when it matters. Activate display recast times in hotbar settings and display if it's not turned on by default. You get a small timer on your abilities or off global cooldowns with this. In order to make the timers easier to see, change the position to centered. To clean up your hotbar, enable hide unassigned slots, making the ones not used currently transparent. Also you can disable the hotbar numbers and cycling buttons. Next we disable display error messages when actions fail. This is found in lock window settings and general. It prevents you from getting an error message if an action can't be used, like when you're out of range or your action is still on cooldown. You won't need this after playing for a while because you can tell why your skill didn't go off without. In control settings and target we can enable auto target according to priority. This auto targets enemies for you by pressing any attack, which is just easily one of my favorite settings. You don't necessarily have to select an enemy before pulling anymore. You can keep hitting it without interruptions should you lose your target on accident. In case your enemy dies right before your next skill comes up, a new one will be selected for you as long as you keep pressing your buttons. This can even help with selecting a specific target if tap targeting fails you in some cases. When it comes to the priority, it's mostly a matter of preference, I think. Target type also comes down to preference. Ignore depth cycles through enemies from left to right within camera sight, starting with the closest enemy to your character, while cone targeting prioritizes closer enemies that are in front or inside the field of vision of your character. From the testing I've done, I think both have their own advantages. The first option seems to let you target enemies that are behind you without having to turn around, while the second feels like you have more control over what enemy you want to target first. For ground targeting, enable limit ring movement to targeting range. By default, you can move your ground targeting ability out of range, which is kinda pointless since you can't use it there anyway. Enabling this setting prevents that and ensures that you can always use it when needed, even if you lost your cursor and it's slightly out of range. Press action twice to execute allows you to place ground targeting abilities very quickly, making weaving them a lot easier and more comfortable. There's also slight delay between seeing the target area on the ground and using the action, so you have a bit of time to position it correctly even when spamming the ability. It's also useful for Ninja Shukuchi for example, unless they change it of course. You can use it a lot faster to get yourself out of AoEs or move to another spot almost instantly now. Since I mentioned losing your target earlier, that was also a problem I had when switching from controller to mouse and keyboard. Well, there's a setting that fixed that for me. For this we go into the mouse tab and disable clicking on field to remove target. Now there's no way to accidentally click off your target by moving your camera with your mouse for example. You can press escape to remove targets or sheath your weapon in case you need to. I think this is also more reliable than clicking targets off, especially for mechanics that force you to stay still. You may also want to disable right-click selection of player characters to prevent selecting a party member on accident with your mouse while trying to move your camera. Players can still be selected with a left click, so there's not really a disadvantage when disabling this. In display name settings, you can select display class or job icons with nameplate within the General tab, and choose what type of icon you prefer. Apply colors according to role enables different colors for your party members, so you got a different one for tanks, healers and DPS. This may be helpful to keep track of others for certain things like light party sticks or partner adjusts. I kept them pretty much on default, only adjusting things slightly. Name and UI colors of pretty much everything else can be customized too, like for NPCs or enemy hitboxes. Back in control settings under character are the battle effect settings. You can limit the amount of effects displayed on your screen. This can be helpful especially in higher end raids or alliance raids. Effects like ground-targeted healing abilities are still visible when choosing Show Limited. You can even set effects to show none on others, as in other alliance members that are not in your party, because their ground-targeted heals don't affect you, so it's not really necessary to see them. In your eye settings under Party List, you can hide the Party List when solo if not enabled already, and you can choose how many status effects are displayed next to your party list. I prefer only 5 since I usually only pay attention to them if there's any debuffs going out. I would also recommend to enable display remaining time of status effects to see the timers on the party list as well. This can be very helpful when resolving certain debuff-based mechanics. Summoner pets are pretty huge on default and can sometimes obstruct your view. However, their size can be changed with a simple command. For that, you just type /PetSizeAll and choose between small, medium or large. This can be done inside and outside of duties. You can disable camera effects when initiating actions here if you are serious about having no distractions whatsoever. This prevents camera shaking when using some attacks. The camera speed can be changed here as well, and you might also want to adjust the camera angle at some point. Sometimes it can be better to go for more of a top-down perspective for certain fights or mechanics. You can also adjust the angle with control up or down on PC. Now I'll go over some macros that I think everyone should benefit from, starting with the most basic one, the sprint macro. For this I'm gonna need to explain some core mechanics of the game, which I'll do in a moment. First we go into user macros under system and choose one of those slots for now. We can give this macro a name and then start with the first line that removes any error messages. Next type /AC sprint, copy this line, paste it 12 more times before finishing it with Micon or macro icon. The regular sprint can be replaced with the macro now on every job you have. There's a point in doing this which I'm gonna explain now. Almost every action in the game has something like a built-in queue, meaning if you press an action right before it is ready to use, it will enter a short queue and activate as soon as it is available. Or if you press any action inside an animation, the animation will finish and the game will execute the next action in queue for you without needing another input. This prevents delays or clipping to some extent. Sprint is an exception that doesn't have this queue at all. You might have noticed it not activating sometimes even though you feel like it should have, so we use this macro to fix this issue to some extent by emulating a queue. With that, the game will try to execute one line per in-game frame. That means by having 13 lines instead of only one, there are more chances now for it to go off, creating a longer activation window, basically making our sprint macro slightly more responsive than the regular one. The next one is for tanks only. It's pretty much the default macro for Shurk that will replace the regular one on your hotbar. Commands are almost the same as the sprint macro we made, with the exception that we set this ability up to be always used on the second player on our party list. That one being the other tank in full party duties except alliance raids and unless you didn't change the order of your party list. Basically you just Shurk your co-tank instantly now without having to select them first. If you're new to the game, you probably won't really need it in most of the regular story content. But it will become a relevant tool for enmity management when tanks start to get more responsibilities and harder content, like tank swapping. Mouse over macros are insanely useful in my opinion if you are using a keyboard and mouse. These allow you to use any single target actions that work on party members faster by hovering over their names in the party list instead of having to select them manually. You can also hover over their character itself, but I prefer the party list just because players are moving around and can block off each other. Mouse over macros can still be used even if you're alone by using them while hovering over your enemy. Most macros I use are actually mouse over macros. I made a lot for healers but also a few for dash abilities to have the option to dash towards party members instead. There are also a few for tank mitigations that can be used on others. If you plan on using mouse over macros for yourself and happen to have more than one character, I would recommend to create them on shared, so you have access to all of them and don't have to create or adjust them more than once. One disadvantage mouse over macros or all macros have is that they are more likely to clip or delay than regular skills and abilities. Default queues are still just better than emulated queues within macros, so you have to be extra careful when using them, and it might take a bit of time to get used to mouse over. In case you're worried about mouse over GCD healing causing you to lose damage by clipping, there's no need I think, because if you're really into optimizing your damage as a healer then you're most likely not going to be spamming single target GCD heals, as just using them is already a damage loss. Players can be soft targeted by using a mouse wheel, meaning an action can be used on them before going back to your main target automatically. This might be a good alternative to mouse over macros in case you don't want to use them. Here you can choose to scroll through your party list with your mouse wheel while holding Ctrl, Alt or Shift. I have to say that I don't have much experience with this myself since I'm a mouse over user, but I think that this should be a decent way of selecting party members after getting used to it. Another thing to note is that there are actually 2 movement types in this game. I myself use Legacy and I also replaced Move Left and Right with Strafing, which frees up 2 keybinds I can now use otherwise. It's simple and I like Strafing because it makes reading some mechanics really comfortable for me. The only disadvantage with my own movement setup, I guess, is that your character will only walk if you try to go backwards at an angle, but it shouldn't be an issue after getting used to it. Make sure to enable automatically face target when using action that can be found under target, so you can attack enemies while looking away. Also, if you use Legacy, especially on controller, I would recommend to enable this setting to prevent your camera from turning on its own when moving sideways. If you keep losing your mouse cursor every now and then because you feel like it's too small, then its size can be changed in System Config under Mouse Settings. In keybinds under System, there's also the mouse zoner that you can put on, for example, a mouse button that you don't use otherwise, to find your cursor again. Another thing worth mentioning is using Focus Target, as it can be helpful in some cases. If you're not sure where to go during a certain mechanic, you can focus target someone you trust and follow them. Or if you don't feel like paying attention yourself every now and then. It is kinda free, so if it can help you in any way, however niche it may be, then why not? Focus target can be placed on any keybind that works for you. On controller, it can be selected after pressing X or square on a target. In case you want to be able to select a specific object or NPC during an encounter, for instance, you might wanna go over your target filters and check if you have everything you need enabled there. Tap targeting isn't affected by this, but your left and right arrow buttons that can also be used to select things. With that, we can move on to other settings that affect things outside of encounters, starting with theme settings that allow you to change how most of your UI looks like. As of now, you have these 4 options to choose from. Window sizes can be changed by right-clicking the top and selecting Scale Window. On controller, you simply press the right stick to change the last one opened. When you are teleporting to different locations and have trouble finding specific areas, go into Teleport Settings and change the order to Display by Expansion. This way of sorting areas might make more sense to you and help with that. Back in Character Config, Control Settings General enables skip playback of previously viewed cutscenes, so you don't need to skip every dungeon, trial or raid cutscene you've already seen anymore, while also giving you faster loading times within instances, because the game also skips loading any assets needed for those cutscenes. The other 2 are for transport and housing, like if you train a chocobo, for example. They are not as impactful as the first one, but this game can be very time consuming, so might as well. Like I said, this never skips any new cutscenes, so you can turn this on without missing anything. In item settings, you can expand your inventory interface to your preference. You can also set your retainer inventories to expand it. Disable the next setting so your new gear goes into the inventory first instead of your armory chest where all of your currently used gear should be. If you unlocked your Grand Company and progressed far enough to be able to trade in gear for currency, make sure to hide armory chest items within expert deliveries to prevent trading in any important piece of gear you have. You can also choose if you want your highest level items to be first or last in the priority. Your emotes can be sorted by name if you prefer that, and display log messages can be disabled to prevent you from leaving any chat messages when using emotes. In System Config, under Graphics Settings, you can change the resolution of your UI from standard to high. There are mounts in the game that come with their own emotes. Then there are also fashion accessories, which might include some additional poses too. On default, your first hotbar will be replaced with the pet hotbar, including the action of set mount or accessory while using it. You can find the settings for that at the bottom of Hotbar Settings display within Character Config. Both can be turned off to prevent this from happening. Then you can go into HUD Layout, search for Pet Hotbar, enable it, then adjust and place it somewhere, so it will appear separately from now on in case you prefer that. If something like Auto Umbrella is enabled for one of your fashion accessories, which makes you use it every time it's raining, then you still have access to all of your actions without the need to disable the fashion item or drawing your weapon. You can use a chat command to easily find any item you might have misplaced. Simply type /iSearch, leave space and then the name of the item you're searching. The partial name is fine too, because in that case you'll get a list of possible items to choose from. Select the right one and you have the option to search for it. In case you want to keep the background music of the current Zone 1 mounted, you can disable this setting. This can be found in Sound Settings under System Config. I already mentioned this in my controller guide, but for completion's sake I'll add this here as well. Pasting item names you copied earlier can be enabled within controller settings. In log window settings, log details, timestamps can be added to chat messages if you want those. Furthermore, in case you are doing some crafting and gathering and don't want to see the message of every action you take on those jobs, you can disable chat logs for each tab under Announcements. Lastly, in Duty Finder, you can choose to enable Join Parties in Progress, which, if you're lucky, lets you join a duty that is almost complete and save some time on daily roulettes, for example. Unrestricted Party allows you to queue into instances with fewer players than normally required, or even alone without sinking you down, meaning you will stay level 100 in a level 70 instance, for example. This becomes useful if you just want to run some lower level duties for completion and skip long queue times, or maybe farm some minions or mounts on your own. All current content is excluded from this, of course, as well as ultimate raids, even if they are older than the latest expansion. Also, you can do this with older alliance raids, but you need at least 3 players separated into 3 different groups in order to enter those. You can set this up via Party Finder. If you're running daily roulettes with a pre-made group, for example with friends or your free company, then you can limit the level range of leveling duties. You will need to have 4 players for this to work, and it counts as long as the party leader enabled the setting before queuing up. So when the lowest level party member within your group is level 70, the lowest level dungeon you could get is 63. This can give you more experience since dungeons close to your current level give more on top of the daily bonus. There's also Explorer mode for completed dungeons if you're into G-posing and taking screenshots. You can even set up striking dummies or use limit breaks inside. And that's pretty much it. If you got this far, as always, thank you for watching and hopefully you got something out of this. So until next time.